So, good evening and welcome everyone. On behalf of the LAM Foundation, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's LAMposium in Your Living Room educational webinar series. These webinars are part of the LAM Foundation's ongoing commitment to offer resources and support to our community. We are so glad you joined us. My name is Cindy Beasley, and I am the Director of Education and Advocacy for the Foundation, and I will be your moderator this evening. Now, before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank our generous sponsor, the National Disease Research Interchange, or NDRI. NDRI's partnership with the LAM Foundation and LAM patients has pushed forward the science of LAM through the coordination of LAM tissue procurement at the time of transplant. We appreciate their ongoing support in our research efforts and our educational programs. So, a few quick technical items before we begin. The microphones will be muted and the chat box disabled throughout the presentation. At the conclusion of the presentation, we will open up the chat box for Q&A. Now, following the Q&A, we will move into a patient and family group discussion. I encourage you to stay logged on for this opportunity to connect with fellow LAM community members from across the globe. For the best viewing experience, I'd ask that you please consider changing your view to speaker. This can be done in that upper right-hand corner of your Zoom screen where you see the word view next to multi-layered boxes. If you simply click on view and select the speaker view, that will put that option in place. So we have a fantastic program for you this evening as we welcome our special guest, Dr. Marina Holz. Dr. Marina Holz is the chair of the LAM Scientific Advisory Board, which advises the LAM Foundation on all scientific matters and determines the focus of LAM research to be supported by the board of directors. She is dean of the Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences at New York Medical College, where she leads an NIH-funded laboratory studying the mechanisms of signaling by hormones and growth factors in LAM, as well as breast cancer. The work of the Holz Lab was the first to describe the biochemical connection between mTOR and estrogen signaling, as well as spearheading RESULT, which was a trial of resveratrol and sirolimus in LAM. Dr. Holz is a dedicated mentor to students and fellows in her lab, with many of her trainees going on to successful health professional and biomedical research careers. Dr. Holtz's groundbreaking study titled the LAM Patients Need Assessment and Research Priorities Survey, or LAM-PREP, was supported by the LAM Foundation and is a cornerstone of the work being done currently by the board of directors in setting strategic priorities for the future. So we welcome you, Dr. Holz.
Thank you so much, Cindy, for this kind introduction. I hope you can hear me, and please let me know if you stop hearing me, and then I'll switch my audio devices. I'm going to share my presentation. So as Cindy said, I am the chair of the Scientific Advisory Board of the LAM Foundation. One of the priorities that we engage in is determining the scientific priorities for the annual research grant program. And we fund many promising research projects that directly address the needs of LAM patients, and very proud of this work. And the work that I'm going to present to you today directly addresses the research grant program as well as the strategic plan that Cindy mentioned, because we really wanted to determine what is important to LAM patients and how we can address that in the best way. So before I begin, I really would like to thank everyone who participated in this project that started almost 2.5 years ago. So Sherman, who is the former executive director of the LAM Foundation, as well as many people who you know who are here on this call, staff members of the LAM Foundation, board members, as well as many physicians who you probably know by name. And most importantly, I want to thank all of you LAM patients who participated in the focus groups, as well as in the survey that we emailed, as well as your loved ones who came with you to the focus groups. And I really appreciate your willingness to share so much information that was so helpful in creating and formulating the survey. To tell you a little bit more about me, as Cindy said, my day job is the Dean of the Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences at New York Medical College. And being a dean is one of my favorite things because I get to award diplomas to students. So I really love interacting with students. I am also a scientist, and I have a lab that focuses on diseases of women, such as LAM and breast cancer. And I received my first grant from the LAM Foundation over 10 years ago now, focusing on the role of estrogen in LAM. And I really got involved with the LAM Foundation ever since. It really changed the trajectory of my career. And I have been member of the Scientific Advisory Board since 2018, and I chaired it since 2023. As you know, the LAM research focuses on three important cornerstones. One is obviously research innovation. We want to support the best science that can drive innovation in LAM towards the cure. Another is clinical translation. We want to adopt best practices in the clinic to better help patients. And the one most important thing, in my opinion, is the real world experience of LAM patients, because LAM patients are the ones who have to deal with the day-to-day challenges of the disease. And they also have real world feedback on whether the treatments are working, what are the challenges, what are the roadblocks in diagnosis, and what are their thoughts on how to improve the research as well as the clinical translation of our efforts. So really, we would like to integrate all three, and LAM-PREP is part of that. So what we discovered as we're reading more about how to involve patients in research is that we all know that patients are the best positioned to determine what are the real priorities in research that are relevant to their disease. But very few patient benefit foundations engage in the type of work that solicits patient opinions on the research projects that are funded by foundations, for example, and formulating the research agendas. Patients with rare diseases such as LAM are uniquely positioned in directing the research efforts towards the treatment and cure of their disease. So it's really a no-brainer that determining those patient priorities can really guide very thoughtfully the implementation of a comprehensive research roadmap for LAM that in a way that we can allocate resources in the most thoughtful way to improve the health outcomes of patients with LAM. And so LAM-PREP was born, and there are two main goals. First was to really understand the health needs of LAM patients that can also translate into the research priorities that can address those health needs. And the second goal was to compare those priorities to those of professionals, so the scientists and the clinicians who study the disease and treat it in the clinic. And we wanted to see if there are areas of alignment or also areas of disparity that we can address in those opinions, what is most important in LAM. And this was the overall design of the survey. We first convened in the design phase, and we created a committee that consisted of LAM professionals, scientists, board members, and we formulated how we're going to do this, because there are many ways to ask opinions of people, but we can do it in a scientific way. So we determined how we're going to do that by reading literature about similar surveys that were conducted. And we decided to do it in two phases. Phase one was the qualitative phase, where we decided to conduct focus groups where we can actually solicit raw opinions of patients as well as their loved ones about what is most important to them. So this is a qualitative data collection phase where we could actually take those opinions, transcribe them, and create themes of responses that we can then formulate into something more quantitative. So the quantitative part of the survey, we called it phase two, was the survey that many of you have received last year. And it is really a quantitative data collection that we can actually ascribe numbers to and we can measure. And our goal was to measure those priorities and rank them in a way that makes sense based on the results of the focus group. And the end result would be to implement those results in creating a research roadmap, as well as deciding how we can best engage the LAM community, create a strategic plan, and allocate research funding towards those goals. So in the first phase, as I said, we conducted focus groups, and here's a picture of me in one of the first focus groups that we conducted in Denver. We had 5 in total. 3 were in person during the summer of 2023, and then we had 2 virtual focus groups in the fall of 2023 to get the opinions of those who couldn't travel or were too far from a location of a focus group. And overall, 88 people attended those, and I really appreciate everyone who came, and I really got to know many of you. And the second phase was a quantitative community-wide survey that we distributed in the spring of 2024 that will allow us to rank the research priorities that we identified in the focus group. And we had an overwhelming response. I must say that my goal was 500 responses. We got almost 750, which is more than I could ever hope. And I really would like to thank many members of the LAM community who answered the survey, but also the staff of the LAM Foundation who helped me work the administrative aspects of it. And you know, many of the people who sent you the survey, these are the people who worked very, very hard on it. And the results of the focus groups were we identified several themes of importance to LAM patients. Almost the first thing that anyone said in the focus group was topics related to quality of life, such as oxygen. And I'm sure that is something that you can really support. Many of you have struggled with oxygen supplementation, as well as travel, mental health, chronic fatigue, relationships, diet, and many other aspects of just being a patient with a chronic disease. Another area that we identified was disease management. There are many concerns about how to manage your disease, how to address various symptoms of LAM in the lung and outside the lung, and how to coordinate care. Many of you were also concerned about the effects of LAM outside of the lung. For example, questions about childbearing. What is the role of hormone during the different life stages of being a woman, such as what happens about birth control, what are the most safe methods, what are the effects of menopause on my disease, other gynecological issues that women encounter, other symptoms in the muscle, for example, or pelvic symptoms are they related to LAM, as well as the effects of the immune system, especially for those who are on sirolimus, which is a drug that modifies the immune system. Many of you created really important lists of questions in LAM biology that could be addressed through basic science. What are the genetics of LAM? Is it heritable? What are the effects of immune system from the scientific perspective? Is the immune system involved in initiating or propagating the disease? What is the role of the lymphatic system? And what is the role of the diet and its components in modifying the disease? And really the most vocal part of the discussion was always about what are the ways in finding a treatment and a cure, finding new treatment, improving testing, finding new biomarkers that can help diagnose the disease better as well as study its progression. Is there any way to repair my lungs? Is there any way to study stem cells that can regenerate lung tissue? And can we really study sirolimus better to understand how it affects my body if I take it since my early 20s, right? How can we prevent LAM in women with CSC, for example? Really, really good questions. And I presented this part of the research last year in May at the American Thoracic Society meeting. And there was also a lot of interest from other physicians in the room about this as a study, not only from LAM perspective, but also from scientific perspective. So using the results of the focus group, we formulated a community-wide survey, and we sent it to almost 5,500 email recipients, of whom 3,000 were patients. And we had a demographic questionnaire where we collected basic demographic information, as well as questions about LAM disease characteristics. And importantly, we had the questionnaire about health needs and research priorities, and also the ability to rank different research projects that we came up with. And this survey was active for 3 months during the spring of 2024. And we received almost over 600 patient responses, which is really overwhelming because it's 20% of the entire known LAM patient community that we have in the LAM Foundation database. So this is a really amazing response, and I'm so proud of all of you who participated. So this is the summary of the numbers that we received. Many friends and relatives of LAM patients also responded. So your loved ones really do love you. And these are some of the results of the demographic portion of the survey. So we asked really basic questions about LAM disease characteristics, which were also very interesting. And these are the numbers that representative of general LAM disease. So the population who answered the survey is really in line with the general LAM population that we know from other databases. So here we have, for example, the age distribution of LAM patients. So we see that the median is between 45 to 54, which is aligned with what we know. We also asked about menopause status because we know that a menopause transition affects how the disease progresses. So the majority of patients were postmenopausal. We also asked about disease severity, whether or not the patients know what kind of LAM they have, whether it's TSC related or whether it's sporadic. We asked about being on mTOR inhibitors such as sirolimus, and more than half of the respondents were on sirolimus. And we also asked about the need for oxygen supplementation. So about 30% of patients were on oxygen. And this is something interesting. We also asked a question about the age of LAM diagnosis. So you can see that the diagnosis really follows what is called a normal distribution, meaning that it looks kind of symmetrical, like a bell curve. And you can see that the mean or the median of this distribution is about 35 years of age, which is in line with what we know about LAM. But very interestingly, we also ask, when do you think your LAM symptoms started? And you can see that this curve is very similar, but now the mean is at 25. So even though there's a little bit of bias in this answer, because some people may not know exactly when these symptoms began, they don't know if the symptoms they had can really be prescribed to LAM. But overall, this is pretty accurate and actually quite telling that the age of symptoms precedes the age of diagnosis by about 10 years. And we know that this is a disease that's really difficult to diagnose. And even though it's changing now, we still have this distribution of women who really had that difficulty in diagnosis. And this is something that we really need to address with future projects and initiatives. So we asked 3 banks of questions about health needs and research priorities, and I'll show them to you one by one. I just wanted to show you all of the questions on one page, but we divided them into 3 stages. So the first set of questions focused on LAM health needs. And we focused on questions about travel, sexual and women's health, work-life balance, impact of LAM on relationships, understanding and interpreting LAM symptoms, access to comprehensive LAM care, awareness of LAM among physicians, which I know is a big difficulty, as well as financial concerns. And we asked this question in slightly different ways. So patients were asked which LAM health needs are most concerned to you. And LAM physicians, we asked them 2 different questions that are nuanced, right? So one of them is, which need do you encounter the most? And the second one, which need you don't have a good solution for, right? So kind of same question, but the answer could be different. So this is what we got as the answers. So this is our data. So here, the red and blue bars are patients and their loved ones, patients in red or pink and loved ones in blue. And here we have clinicians. So this is the 2 questions that we asked the physician. The question, which LAM need do you encounter the most, in this greenish, yellowish. And in the teal, we have the which needs you don't have a good solution for. And just even without looking at this in a lot of detail, you can see that there is a lot of agreement between the 2 graphs in terms of the kinds of questions that are the most priority to both patients, their caregivers or loved ones, as well as to LAM physicians. And also some differences, right? There are some areas of difference among the 2 questions we asked to the physicians And also your loved ones think that something is more important than what the LAM patients think. So that was really interesting to us. But overall, there's a lot of agreement, for example, because you probably go through your disease together with your loved one, so it's not a surprise. And for LAM clinicians, there's also probably a lot of difficulties that they observe that they can't find a good solution for example, sexual women's health, right? They might observe it, but they really might not have a lot of solution for it because they're mostly pulmonologists. So it's understandable. So these are the summary of the top 3 needs that we observed in the answers. So for patients, awareness of LAM among physicians was the top need, access to comprehensive LAM care, as well as understanding and interpreting LAM symptoms. Really, really not surprising, but really important because we really need to address that. And for clinicians, we really saw a lot of agreement with what the patient said, but also a slight nuance. As I said, for LAM clinicians, sexual women's health was something for which they see a lot of, but they don't have a lot of tools to address. And if you think about it, any new patient that arrives in a physician's office probably is younger now than they used to be, and they have a lot of these questions. And the physicians just don't have the tools right there and then to address them. So that's something that we need to think about. The second set of questions were focusing on quality of life and LAM management. And we focused on supplemental oxygen, effect of LAM on sleep quality, mental health, childbearing and family planning, safe exercise, managing LAM transplantation, the impact of diet, and chronic fatigue. And these are our answers. We asked these questions of patients, their loved ones, and clinicians. So patients are in red or pink, clinicians are in blue, the yellow brown, however it appears on your screen, and caregivers or loved ones are in blue. And again, a lot of agreement about what is important. Mental health is the top quality of life concern for LAM patients. And it's not surprising because it's really difficult to live with a chronic and rare disease. And as you can see, there was also a lot of disagreement in terms of what is important to the physician. So for example, childbearing and family planning, again, emerged as a huge area of need for physicians. And again, probably because they see a lot of these questions and they can't address them just yet, just because we don't have an answer to this. So that's, again, something that we really need to address going forward to make sure that this is something that can be addressed in the clinic. But overall, as you can see, a lot of agreement in terms of what is important and a lot of agreement between the different respondent groups, which we're really pleased about because that means that the patients and the physicians are really aligned in addressing the needs and the quality of life of LAM patients. So to summarize this, for the top 3 priorities for quality of life and managing LAM, for patients, mental health, effects of LAM on sleep quality, managing supplemental oxygen, and for clinicians, also supplemental oxygen and mental health, but also a lot of concerns about childbearing and family planning. And then the last set of questions focus on really areas of research, something that we can address through research projects, even research projects that can be funded by the LAM Foundation. And we identified several research projects based on what the LAM patients and their loved ones discussed in focus groups, role of hormones in LAM disease and its treatment, studying how LAM can affect other organs in the body, studying disease onset and progression, studying lung regeneration, the lymphatics and the immune system, identifying the origin of LAM cells in the body, where does LAM come from, understanding LAM genetics and heredity, better lung function testing, better diagnosis, and managing mTOR inhibitors such as sirolimus, which is really important for some of you. And the most important need, as turns out, is finding new treatments and a cure. And that was something that really came out really strong. And obviously, it's not a surprise that one of the goals for almost everyone who works with LAM. And not surprisingly, that was also the top priority that came up in the survey. So I have 2 graphs here for you. Here, the red and blue are patients and their loved ones. And here, the green and the yellow are scientists and clinicians. And again, just by looking at this, a lot of agreement between all four groups, patients, their caregivers, scientists, and clinicians. A little bit of disagreement. So for example, scientists really are interested in identifying the origin of LAM in the body, less so than other groups, and that's understandable. That is a very important research project. But all groups agree that finding new treatments and a cure is exceptionally important. All groups agreed that studying the role of hormones in LAM is also exceptionally important. And it's really providing us with the rank of priorities to create a research roadmap that addresses the most important needs. And it's a very important work, in my opinion, because now we really know where to direct the resources. Not to say that any of these areas is less important, they all are, because they were all identified in the focus groups by real patients. So to summarize the top three areas for this bank of questions, finding new treatments and a cure was the top priority without any question. Studying the role of hormones in LAM disease was also top priority, as well as studying how LAM affects other organs. Studying disease onset and progression was a priority for LAM scientists and physicians. And finally, the last part of the survey was a little bit theoretical. Based on the results of the focus group, we came up with hypothetical projects that we could potentially see as submitted to the annual grant cycle program. For example, we had designed projects to address the question of travel and oxygen, comparing, for example, risk factors for travel versus designing portable oxygen delivery systems. And we asked, if they presented with two projects, which one would you pick, right? So we had different projects designed for almost every category of research that was important in the previous questions. And again, they're hypothetical projects, and I'm not going to go through each of them one by one, but I'm just going to show you some answers, and you'll see how much agreement there is in terms of what is important. So for example, that same question on travel and oxygen, we had two different projects, and you can see that designing better portable oxygen delivery system wins across all three groups, across patients, clinicians, and scientists. And for example, if you look here, there's another good example of a lot of agreement. Let me see here, for example, in childbearing and family planning. So the project on risk of pregnancy and LAM progression won hands down compared to other projects. Not to say that they're not important, they're also real questions, but if we had a limited pool of money, maybe we should put it in this basket. And then we had 6 other projects again, for example, in this question, studying how LAM could affect other organs won hands down over, for example, studying asthma or how LAM might affect cancer, right? So again, if we had a limited pool of money and these 4 projects, we would choose this one. So again, it gives us some idea of what are the real projects that are of importance if we were to redirect the research program in that way. So to summarize the results of LAM-PREP, I have to say we were so pleased with the very high patient engagement throughout the entire process. The patients and their loved ones that came to focus groups, as well as every one of you who answered the survey. And what this accomplished is creating this repository of unique perspectives on living with LAM and real granular insights into health needs, quality of life concerns, and research priorities of not only LAM patients, but also their loved ones, as well as the scientists who studied the disease and the physicians who treat it, which I think is something that is unique and probably has never been done before on such a scale. And importantly, we identified not only the priorities of each group, but also areas of alignment and disagreement that we can address by either studying the disease better or studying the tools for disease management and treatment. And what it really shows us is patients could guide the professional in setting the research priorities because patients know what is important to them. And I hope that this will be a trove of really useful data that can guide not only the research priorities of the LAM Foundation as well as the entire LAM community, but also assist in the strategic planning process that LAM Foundation just started a few months ago. And you probably all received an email announcing the LAM Foundation strategic planning process that is now kicking into high gear. And we hope to present the results of the strategic planning process at the LAMposium in September, which will incorporate all of the patient needs and research priorities that will guide the foundation into the next 5 years. So I would really like to thank you for your attention and thank you all for coming. And I can answer any questions that you may have.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Holz, for all you've done. This is so impressive. And we are so grateful to you that you continue to ensure that the voices in our LAM community are heard, and not only just heard, but really understood. So we really appreciate that. Thank you. I know I was particularly struck the first time I saw this by how the results show the varying perspectives of our LAM stakeholders, right? And so understanding that is really critical for us as we move forward. So thank you. So at this time, we have a unique opportunity to ask questions to Dr. Holz regarding this LAM-PREP study. If you would, please type your questions in the chat box for review, and I will be happy to ask them. So the chat box is now open.
I'm sorry, it says chat is disabled.
Let's try that again. Erin, are you able to address that?
Yeah, it should be working now.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. All right. We've got our first question here. It says, will the studies be impacted by the new pause on federal funding?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the federal funding pause only applies to federal grants. So obviously, any LAM scientist who is funded by the NIH or other federal sources would be affected. However, the research that is supported by the LAM Foundation will not be. And that is, I guess, one of the benefits of the LAM Foundation supported research program is that it provides an independent avenue to conduct important LAM research. And I think all of you know that I think almost every dollar that the LAM Foundation contributes towards research comes from the LAM community. So this is really important. So hopefully that the federal funding freeze will be addressed, but the LAM Foundation funding initiative is not affected.
Thank you. And then I have another question. How will the results of your study be made available to other researchers?
That's a really good question as well. So I submitted the study for publication in a peer-reviewed paper as a peer-reviewed paper, and it is currently under review. So hopefully it will get accepted and published soon. But I will also present it at the American Thoracic Society meeting in May to those who would come to that, as I did last year. So I'm planning to disseminate the findings as soon as possible.
Great. And are there plans to administer the surveys with additional patients, clinicians, and researchers who missed the opportunity before?
That's a good question. So we're not planning another similar survey, but perhaps this is something that can be considered going forward. Maybe this survey or a modification of the survey can be done at regular intervals just to check the pulse of the community as we progress scientifically in our understanding of the disease and improve our treatment. And perhaps there could be targeted surveys that will focus just in certain areas of interest. So I anticipate that there'll be more of that going forward.
Thank you. And then, we're hoping you will know a little bit more about this than we do. Are there ways that we can help in terms of releasing federal funding?
Yes, you can contact your Congress people and your senators and advocate for supporting funding towards research in general, as well as research into rare and chronic diseases like LAM. they do listen.
Great, thank you. In the LAMI's Facebook group, someone mentioned a possibility for a study of a leukemia drug combined with sirolimus. Do you know anything about this? And if so, do you know when it would move forward? Have you heard anything about that as a researcher?
Yes. So I don't know the particular question because I'm not on Facebook, but there are several drugs that we use in other diseases that have already been in clinical trials for LAM and that are being considered. And in fact, I know that this will be part of the strategic plan to take a look at how we can move forward with knowledge from other diseases and apply these FDA-approved drugs to LAM, which will be a sort of a shorter runway than starting with a brand new drug.
Thank you. And somebody is asking about this. There was a recent article that came out about this compound RMC 5552 and what is the research path. I know that we reached out to Jillian Evans, the researcher on that. And my understanding, and Dr. Holz, you can add to this if you've got more information. My understanding is that this compound is being examined with cancer patients currently, and that is where the clinical trials are lying. They are looking at similar pathways that LAM has, but right now the concentration is on cancer. We continue to ask and look for opportunities to be a part of those trials, but right now it is in phase 1 with that particular patient group. Do you have anything to add to that, Dr. Holtz?
I think you summarized it very well. This is exactly what is happening right now. But it's really promising that many cancer drugs can also be applicable to LAM. We just have to find how to do it in a safe way, right? Because the main difference is that cancer is a very acute and deadly disease, and we can tolerate much more toxic treatments in that setting. That's not something that we want to do with patients who have a chronic disease and overall outside of LAM are healthy, right? So we want to maintain that balance, but there's definitely a lot of promising drugs in the pipeline.
Great, thank you. We've got another question. Oxygen popped up as one of our #1 areas of concern. I don't see it as just a quality of life concern where it was addressed specifically, but a concern with access to care. In the surveys, is oxygen considered part of the access to care in the medical category?
That's a really good question. So for the survey, we put the question about oxygen in that particular category of quality of life, but it definitely came up as a financial concern as well. So the survey also had open comments sections where you can write, and some patients wrote about that, as well as it came up in the focus groups where patients spoke about this. And that's something that, even though it was a qualitative result, we could still quantify the number of responses in that area. And there's definitely a correlation between access to oxygen as well as the financial concerns and other access concerns.
Great. And I know there's a question here about traveling to China. We will try and answer your question offline. I will give that to Erin. We want to make sure that the questions here today are specifically about our LAM-PREP survey. Does anybody else have anything they would like to add? All right. Well, any closing thoughts, Dr. Holtz, before we let you go?
As I said, I am so happy to have met many of you in focus groups. I recognize many faces here on Zoom, and I know that it was really life-changing for me to speak to patients and to hear about their concerns and what it's like to live with LAM. Before doing the survey, I was a basic scientist who only knew LAM from the lab, as well as from meeting patients at LAMposium. So this was really life-changing for me. So I would definitely support more opportunities for scientists and patients and clinicians to come together, because you can change many more scientists' lives like you did mine. So I'm really grateful to all of you who took the time to meet me.
We appreciate that. And we're getting all kinds of thank you comments in our chat box now.
Oh, thank you all.
We are so grateful for the time that you took not only to develop this study. I know you spent hours in this. We know working in coordination with you as staff, and We are so very, very grateful. And again, more thank yous are coming in this chat box. So, and it is really exciting to see how the work that you're doing is being integrated into the current work being done to formulate the LAM Foundation strategic plan. It's wonderful to have a North Star really to help us with that. So you have performed a great service for us all, and we are so, so very grateful. So let's give a round of applause for Dr. Holz. I know we can't see everybody, but I know we are all so grateful. And we thank you for being with us. I have to tell you all that Dr. Holz is actually in Florida on vacation, and she took time out of her vacation week to come and share with us. And we're so grateful for her commitment and all that you do. So have a wonderful rest of your evening. Enjoy time with your family and enjoy time in the sunshine while the rest of us are sitting in snow. So have a great, great week. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all.